You've probably seen it. A tunnel of vermilion gates climbing a mountain in Kyoto. So many that it feels like you've stepped into a moving river of red. But here's the secret most people miss. Those gates don't honor a warlord, an emperor, or some distant creator god. They honor Inari, a kami tied to rice, protection, and prosperity. And at the entrance, standing perfectly still like centuries between worlds, are foxes. Not pets, not mascots, guardians. So today we're answering 3 questions that untangle the whole mystery. Why does a rice kami become one of Japan's most widely worshipped divine figures? Why are foxes everywhere in Inari worship if Inari isn't a fox god? And why do people keep walking those gates, centuries later, still making the same kinds of wishes? Because once you understand Inari, you understand something bigger, how everyday life becomes sacred. Inari is one of those names that feels like it belongs to a single character, like you're about to get a neat myth, a neat origin story, a neat personality. But Inari doesn't behave like that. Depending on the region, the shrine, and the era, Inari can feel like a god, a goddess, a presence with many faces, or even a title that gathers multiple kami under one name. You'll hear different stories, different emphasis, different symbolism, and somehow, it all still points to the same core promise. So the goal of this video isn't to force Inari into one box. It's to understand why the Inari-shaped box exists at all. And by the end, the 1,000 Torii gates won't feel like a tourist photo. They'll feel like the visible footprint of millions of prayers. Who and what is Inari? Start with the simplest thread. Inari is deeply tied to rice. And rice isn't just a food. In older Japan, rice was survival. Rice was stability. Rice was tax, wealth, and the difference between making it through winter or not. When you pray to the forces that make rice grow, you're not praying for luxury. You're praying for life to keep working. That's the heart of Inari, the divine support behind nourishment and continuity. But even that rice kami label doesn't cover everything Inari becomes. Because when a society changes, the meaning of harvest changes too. For a farmer, harvest is grain in the field. For a merchant, harvest is profit at the end of the month. For a craftsperson, harvest is steady customers and safe hands. For a household, harvest is simply, please let this year be kinder than the last. So Inari expands, naturally, almost inevitably, into a kami of prosperity, success, protection, and good fortune. Not in an abstract, lottery ticket way. In a practical way, the kind of luck that keeps your work alive, your family safe, your roof intact. And this is why Inari can appear differently from place to place. Some traditions describe Inari in feminine terms, others in masculine terms. Some treat Inari as ambiguous or beyond gender. And in some shrine contexts, Inari isn't one single divine personality, so much as a name that gathers related powers, rice, growth, protection, and thriving, into one approachable presence. That flexibility isn't a flaw. It's the reason Inari endures. Inari isn't only a mythic character you read about. Inari is a relationship people maintain, because people keep needing the same things. Food, safety, work, a future. Now here's where the confusion starts. Because the face of Inari for many people isn't rice at all. It's a fox. People call Inari the fox god, but the fox isn't actually Inari. So why do the fox statues get the spotlight? And why do they look like they're guarding a secret? Foxes, rice, and messengers. Let's be precise. In many Shinto contexts, foxes, Kitsune, are understood as messengers or attendants of Inari. That might sound like a small detail, but it changes everything. Because a messenger isn't the one you pray to. A messenger is the sign that your prayer has reached the right place. So why a fox? Part of it is practical symbolism. Rice fields attract pests. Those pests threaten the harvest. Foxes are predators that hunt along the edges of fields and forests, animals that move where the human world meets the wild. Over time, they become associated with the protection of what grows. But foxes also carry a deeper atmosphere. They live at the boundary, dusk and dawn, field and forest, village and mountain path. And in storytelling, boundary creatures become supernatural. Kitsune, in Japanese folklore, are clever, elusive, and sometimes unsettling. They can be helpful, but they can also be tricksters, spirits who test you, deceive you, or reveal what you didn't want to see. That makes the fox the perfect symbol for a shrine experience. Because a shrine is also a boundary. You step out of ordinary life for a moment, and you speak to something you can't fully define. So the fox statues at Inari shrines aren't just cute guardians. They're a warning and a welcome at the same time. You're entering a place where unseen forces matter. Be respectful. Be careful. And also ask for what you need. And then there are the offerings. Inari worship often includes foods associated with foxes in popular tradition, most famously fried tofu, abaraj, and dishes like inari sushi. Whether or not a fox really loves tofu isn't the point. The point is that the culture built a shared language of devotion, a simple offering, a simple gesture, a way to say, "I remember you." Inari becomes approachable through small rituals. A handful of rice, a visit on a busy day, a quiet request, a thank you. And all of that leads to the most famous Inari place of all, a mountain, a shrine, and gates, so many gates that it looks like devotion has solidified into architecture. Fushimi Inari and the Thousand Gates. Fushimi Inari Taisha in Kyoto is the shrine most people think of when they hear the name Inari. You arrive, and the first thing you notice is the color, vermilion, bright, almost alive. And then you see the gates, lined up in rows, forming corridors that seem to go on forever. Walking through them does something to your brain. You're still in the real world. Your feet are on stone, you can hear other visitors. But the repetition turns the path into a ritual, step after step, gate after gate. Like you're passing through layers. And here's the key, many of those gates are offerings. They're donated as acts of gratitude, acts of hope, acts of devotion, often by individuals, families, and businesses. That's why you see names and dates written on them. Each gate is a message made physical. In a way, the Torii are not just entrances. They're receipts. Evidence that someone asked for help and believed they received it. Evidence that someone wanted their thanks to stay standing after they left. So the famous Thousand Gates aren't just scenery. They're a visible archive of prayers. And when you realize that, the shrine stops being just beautiful. It becomes human. Because the gates aren't saying, "Look at this monument." They're saying, "This many people needed something." Protection, prosperity, relief, a turn in fortune. A harvest that doesn't fail, whatever harvest means for them. And that helps explain something else. Inari worship isn't limited to one shrine. It spreads everywhere, major shrines, neighborhood shrines, tiny roadside altars, because the needs Inari represents are everywhere. Inari becomes the sacred address for ordinary life, which raises a new question. If Inari started in the logic of rice fields, how did Inari become so important to cities, shops, and modern work? Here's the surprising part. Inari didn't stay in the countryside. Inari moved into commerce, and that's when the fox stopped being just a guardian and became a symbol of risk. From farms to cities. Imagine the shift. Villages grow into towns. Towns grow into cities. Work changes. Money moves faster than crops. But human anxiety stays the same. People still wake up thinking, will my work hold? Will my family be okay? Will I lose what I built? Will I get the chance I need? In that world, Inari's meaning expands from rice harvest to life harvest. And this is where Inari becomes especially powerful. Inari is not only a deity you pray to in emergencies. Inari is a deity you pray to in routines. Before opening the shop, before starting a new job, before making a risky decision, before a long trip, after a narrow escape. Inari becomes woven into the rhythm of effort. And when a deity becomes part of effort, not just crisis, devotion multiplies. Because effort is daily. Effort is endless. Effort is what most lives are made of. So Inari shrines appear near homes and businesses, near roads and markets. Sometimes they're grand. Sometimes they're tiny, small enough to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. But their purpose is consistent. A place to ask life to be workable. A place to thank life for being workable. And if that sounds almost too practical to be mythic, that's exactly the point. Inari isn't only about epic battles in the sky. Inari is about whether your roof leaks, whether your child eats, whether your work survives. Now, when the fox becomes a symbol inside that world, inside money, work, desire, fox stories get sharper edges. Because prosperity is not only blessings. Prosperity is temptation. Prosperity is envy. Prosperity is obsession. And that's when Kitsune folklore turns from charming to chilling. Kitsune folklore. In many modern images, the kitsune is cute, loyal, mystical, almost friendly. Folklore is less simple. In stories, foxes can be guides, leading lost travelers to safety, rewarding kindness, protecting shrines. But they can also be tricksters, creating illusions, testing pride, punishing greed, or exposing hypocrisy. And whether you interpret those tales literally or symbolically, the message is consistent. A fox is not good the way a fairy tale pet is good. A fox is liminal, clever, unpredictable, which makes the kitsune a perfect spiritual mirror. If you approach the sacred with respect, you may be protected. If you approach it with arrogance, you may be humbled. If you approach it with greed, you may be consumed by your own hunger. And look how well that matches prosperity itself. Prosperity can save you. Prosperity can also ruin you. So the fox at the shrine gate carries a double meaning. I will guard you, and I will judge what you are doing here. Not because the fox is evil, but because the sacred doesn't exist to flatter you. It exists to transform you. And this is the moment where Inari becomes even more fascinating, because Inari devotion doesn't live in isolation. Over centuries, Japan's religious landscape overlaps and blends, and Inari becomes connected to other religious frameworks too. Which leads to the final layer, why Inari is so adaptable that it survives every era. What if Inari's many faces isn't confusion, but the whole secret? Because the next part explains why Inari can shift forms and still feel like the same presence. Blending with Buddhism and why it endures. Japan's spiritual history includes long periods where traditions influenced each other. Shinto practice, Buddhist practice, local cults, regional deities, often sharing spaces and symbols. Inari is especially suited to that kind of blending, because Inari is already flexible. Inari is not trapped in one rigid portrait. Inari is tied to functions, nourishment, protection, prosperity, and those functions can be translated across different spiritual languages. So depending on place and time, you may find Inari devotion expressed with different imagery, different ritual emphasis, different stories told around the same sacred center. And what remains consistent through all of it is the human reason for praying. People want the world to be livable. They want their efforts to matter. They want the harvest, whatever harvest means to them, to arrive. So Inari becomes enduring, not because Inari is simple, but because Inari is useful in the deepest sense. Inari stays close to the pressures that never go away. Hunger, fear, risk, work, hope. And that's why the Thousand Gates feel timeless. Because even if you don't know a single myth, you can understand what those gates represent. Someone came here afraid. Someone came here grateful. Someone came here desperate. Someone came here hopeful. And they left a gate behind to say, I was here, I asked, I received, I remember. So that's Inari. Not a single fox god, not a single clean character, but a living presence tied to the most practical sacred promise of all, food, safety, and the ability to thrive. The fox stands at the boundary as messenger and guardian. The Torii gates rise like prayers turned into architecture. And the mountain path keeps calling people back, step after step, generation after generation. Because life is uncertain. And Inari is the place where people say quietly, honestly, please, let it work out. And if it does, thank you.